Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a birth worker, life coach for sovereign women, hypnotist, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, I expose the forces at play attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, porn, prostitution, and so much more. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In my coaching, I help women stop getting triggered by every freaking thing, cultivate resilience, stop unwanted behaviors, and increase self-confidence. You can book your first session at whosebodyisit.com. And I want to just say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular episodes for all of you. So with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're just listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider making a financial contribution via the link in the show notes. You can also visit my activist sticker shop. My pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So be sure to take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. I get asked all the time for children's books by women for girls that don't have any trans BS, which is why I am so excited to share with you that this episode is sponsored by Virginia Byrd Books. Virginia Byrd Books has a wholesome, old-fashioned approach to children's literature, so no graphic language or sexuality. The moral of the story is always family first and support sisterhood. The Maiden, the Bird, and the Wolf King is a fairy tale you color, so every little girl can see themselves as the hero. There are 12 story pages written in large letters with a bold font, and each page has a picture that illustrates the words left blank to color. The story is followed by 15 pages of activities that provoke thought and provide space to practice skills, all of which are a continuation of the story, including a finish the sentence writing prompt, a maze, and a word search. The learning level is designed for children 7 years old and up to enjoy on their own, but can also be enjoyed by younger kids with adult participation. With your purchase of The Maiden, the Bird, and the Wolf King, you'll achieve 4 amazing goals. Number 1, you'll be gifting a book filled with wholesome entertainment for a child in your life. Number 2, you'll make a donation to a wonderful cause that aims to protect mothers and save babies from a rare pregnancy condition. Number 3, you'll help a fellow TERF build her children's book business as the current brick and mortar road is rapidly coming to an end. And number 4, you will make an ode to one of the original TERFs, a goddess taken too soon, Magdalen Berns, who the main character is named after. You can learn more about Virginia Byrd Books at virginiabyrdbooks.com and buy your copy of The Maiden, the Bird, and the Wolf King through the Amazon link in the show notes. Without further ado, let's get into this week's story. In this episode, I'm joined by Jennifer, one of the co-founders of Partners for Ethical Care and a mother who shares her discovery of the trans agenda as she fought to loosen its grasp on her 11-year-old daughter. We discuss her daughter's introduction to gender ideology at a camp and an online drawing program, the alarming legislation preventing parents from protecting their children, and the professional systems in place designed to divide families. We get into the importance of language and biological reality when teaching children discernment, the ease with which children can obtain wrong sex hormones without their parents' knowledge or consent, and how the societal structures of gender ideology default in outsourcing parental instincts to an authoritative entity. Jennifer shares her experience being a vulnerable yet powerful mother facing these obstacles head on. Her story is a success story. Jennifer now dedicates her efforts to warning other parents about the irreversible harms children are enduring at the hands of licensed mental health and medical professionals. So, Jennifer, you and I have seen each other at, I think, at least 2 or 3 events now, exposing the harms of trans ideology and lots of mothers. Were you at the canceled women's event in 2019? Were you at that one in New York? Okay.
No, because actually this hit my family sort of at the end of 2019. Yeah. So
I was wondering if that were the case, because I think the story that you're going to be sharing with us is similar to a lot of the moms who that I met at that event in 2019 before I had a channel, before I was like outwardly speaking about all this. And there were so many mothers there of trans identified daughters. Some of them have desisted, some of them are detrans at this point, but many of them have gone on to totally down the path of medicalization and all that stuff. So that was the first event where I was like, holy shit, there are all these moms in this crisis taking their kids out of schools. There was one mom there who had her daughter in a secular, or with quotes, secular school, secular public school, who ended up, she was a Jewish mother, Jewish family, and she ended up putting her daughter in a Catholic all-girls school to get her daughter away from trans ideology, because all her daughter's friends were, taking testosterone, as we know the story goes. So,
yeah.
So we've seen each other at a couple of events. So take us back to like the beginning of this whole madness. Like what was the point where this was an issue in your life?
For us, yeah. Well, like I said, it was the end of 2019. It was right before the pandemic hit, actually, a little bit before that. What happened was our daughter went to an animation camp, and that's really, so she met some friends at this camp who wanted to get on an online drawing program with her, and which I was actually at the time not very comfortable about, just having her be online at all. But we let her, because it was like her friends, and it was drawing, which we thought was good. This story is so typical. Kids getting into art, and they get in these online forums together, and then they get these ideas there. And so I think that's what happened with her. We were on there, my husband and I, as like her friends on there, to watch, to make sure there wasn't anything weird going on. But I didn't really pay attention to, it did seem like she had sort of relationships with her friends on there, like sort of romantic, which I thought was kind of silly at the time. Like I was like, oh, girls, they love each other. That's kind of normal. And maybe they're just, taking it a little bit further. I was so unaware of all of this stuff that's been happening. So that's kind of how she got into it. And she learned some things, I think, there, and got some ideas, and probably even, that's when she started getting on YouTube, and I know she watched some influencers and stuff. Okay, so I knew she was talking about being gay, or like at one point she said aromantic, which is like, of course you're aromantic, you're 10 years old, Anyway, but she kept going through all these different things. And again, I was like, well, this is just identity exploration, right? Like I just didn't think that much of it. And what happened, so at the beginning of her 5th grade year, she donned a new name. And I didn't know about that until I got an email from her teacher that said your child, like he was talking to me about my child with this new name. I actually thought he had the wrong parent at first. I was like, who is this is weird. I went up to my room and I saw that my daughter had written that name on her dresser. I was like, oh, do you have a new nickname? But the thing that I look back and think was really weird about that was that he didn't say your daughter wants to be called this. Like, he just came in with this new name, didn't like give me any explanation, just, I guess, assumed on a communication to me at the beginning of the year. So anyway, that was kind of weird, especially now that I look back. And what happened was, at some point through the year, she used the words with her friend, suicide and cutting. And that then got the attention of the counselor. And the counselor called me and said, that she had said these things, which was a huge surprise to me. And I was like, of course, concerned. And this, the counselor talked me into having her see this special therapist that was contracted with the school. So actually not a school employee, which I look back now and think that's a wall of liability protection. So she talked me into seeing this therapist, who I talked to before. I had to give permission because my daughter was under 13 at the time, and they can't see a therapist without your permission. At 13, I would have not even been notified in our state.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many terrible laws in our state that, that allow children to do things to themselves medically without parents' consent or knowledge.
And are you comfortable revealing what state you're in?
Yeah, I'm in Washington State.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole friggin' West Coast. I mean, Washington, Oregon, California, we all have these terrible laws that allow children to make horrible mistakes without their parents' consent or knowledge. So we can't protect our children. They've basically taken our right to protect our children away from us. It's insane. But anyway, so I talked to this therapist. I said, I know my husband and I, we know that she's kind of like exploring her sexuality. We think she's too young to know at this point in time, but, we're going to love her, of course, no matter where she ends up with it.
You're still thinking it's a sexuality thing.
Yeah, I did. Right? Exactly. I didn't even know that it didn't have anything to do with like sexual attraction. Yeah. At this point, I was fairly ignorant about all of it. I'm not now.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So where was I? Yes. Okay. So I talked to this therapist who, when I said this, didn't say, oh, that's not what I believe. Like, she didn't say anything. She just kind of acknowledged what I said. And I thought this person was somebody who was going to be working with me, helping my child who clearly was having some issues. I did know that she was kind of struggling in some of her friendships at school. And so I thought she would get some help with that. Fast forward, this woman saw my daughter for a month and a half an hour every week.
At the school. So she would come to the school, see her on school grounds, but she wasn't an employee of the school. Okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Really, like right before the pandemic hit, this therapist then calls me and I'm on the phone. I'm in the car with my husband and my brother-in-law, and she's talking to me about my child with male pronouns and the name. And I'm like speechless. And she's saying that she calls me on a Wednesday to tell me that she wants to have a meeting with our daughter and us to help her come out to us.
As a boy.
Yes. And she's calling me so that I have some time to process this. 3 days. Sorry. 3 days to process that my daughter's really a boy. Yeah. And so I'm like, again, I have other people in the car. I don't want to talk about this. I'm just kind of floored at the moment. And I like asked my husband if he would be available for the meeting on Friday. And he's like, yeah. Then later I start talking to him about what the conversation was. he absolutely loses it. He's freaking out. I actually think that at this point, he's being ridiculous. I'm like, nobody's trying to make her anything. And yeah. Oh my God, my poor husband. He knew because he had a friend who had been through this. I didn't know about it. He had a friend who had been through this, who moved out of our state because of our laws.
Wow.
He knew, he actually had experience with a couple of trans identified males that he worked with. And so he saw them go through this and saw that it, like, they were not healthy people. They didn't function in the workplace. It didn't make them happier doing this to themselves. So he had some experience that I didn't have, and some knowledge that I didn't have at the time. So what happened was when she called and said that our daughter was a boy and all this stuff, and she wanted to have the meeting, the reason was that she was supposed to, she said our daughter wanted to stay in the boys' cabin for the,
oh God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So you're processing that this woman is saying, just the absurdity of saying that you're going to have a meeting with them, that you need to have a meeting so your daughter can come out as a boy. Like, the whole thing is just out of this world. Like, yes. What? And then you're processing her saying that. Now you're thinking like, holy shit, my daughter's going to be in a cabin with all
no boys? Way, not ever. I don't care who she thinks she is. Were we going to let her be in the boys' cabin for so many reasons? Like, not even necessarily that I'm so worried that there's a bunch of predatory 5th grade boys, but that's not, like, how many problems is that going to create for her socially? No. And the boys, how uncomfortable is that going to be for them? No. Anyway, I mean, there's so many issues with it, but so that was, we were never remotely considered that an option. But I was like, but I don't understand why she wants to be in the boys' cabin. She just had a sleepover with a bunch of girlfriends, like, and she had no problem with that. This doesn't make any sense to me. I think maybe this is like a cry for attention. Mm-hmm. Therapist didn't even answer me, didn't even act like I said anything. So at some point I was like, honestly, I can't even remember the whole, like, back and forth. The interesting thing is that she would often call me and not email with me about this stuff, which I look back and I think that's so that she didn't have a record. But I kind of quit talking to her because I was like, this isn't making any sense. Something weird is going on. And my husband was like, don't talk to her. And I listened to him because he thought that he's like, she's a social worker by, training. She's probably keeping a file on us. And at the time I was like, I thought that was crazy too, but I know that that's happened. I know that that's happened with other families. And I know that schools keep secret files on families of kids who, identify as transgender. So I didn't know that at the time, but I listened to him, thank God. And I didn't really say much more to this therapist. And we withdrew our permission for her to see our daughter. We said, we are going to actually have her see, another therapist. And in fact, I requested the notes from her therapy, which I actually requested her to give them to me and to give them to this other therapist, which was a therapist I know, a therapist that I had been seeing actually. Mm-hmm. And she acted like she wasn't allowed to give them to the other therapist, which is not true. She told that therapist she couldn't hand them over or something weird. I mean, that was weird. And then it took 3 months for her to get the notes to me. And I asked several times. She said she forgot. When I got the notes, I still can hardly read them. They make me so upset because it talks about us misgendering our daughter, which like
tallying your offenses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually even talked to my daughter about this recently. I was like, do you know what she said about us? She said that we all misgendered you. And she said that even like your brothers did, who didn't even know any of this was ever happening. Like it was all at the school. And she was like, she did. And I was like, yeah, which says to me, my daughter didn't even actually say that. She just probably surmised from their conversation, oh, well, they're just, and then put that in the notes.
Right. Just by the nature of you acknowledging her as your daughter, which
Yes.
that's all she ever was and all ever she will be, that was enough for her to tally that. Like it sounds like she didn't even have to necessarily, it wouldn't even take a parent saying, I am not using wrong sex pronouns for you for her to log that kind of information. Just by the nature of acknowledging that you have a daughter was probably enough for, that's what I'm hearing you say, potentially that could have been the case. Yeah.
Well, my daughter was surprised when I told her that was in the notes. So yeah, I think that this therapist surmised that on her own, that was some thing to tally against us, that she was trying to put those things in there. Yeah. It still upsets me. So what happened though was all this sort of kind of went down right before the pandemic hit. And I was like, as soon as that was happening, before the schools made all the kids go home, I was like, let's just pull her out. We're just going to say, we're afraid of the pandemic and we just don't want her to go to school right now. So we just pulled her out before anybody else was, sent home. I wrote a story about this, but that was a lifesaver, actually, the pandemic, and being able to pull her out, and so that she didn't feel like she was singled out in that way. Like it wasn't like something she did wrong. Everybody.
It was convenient for what
it was so
happening.
Convenient. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was the best thing. One of the best things that could have happened to us. I just actually couldn't wait for the school year to be done because I didn't want her having any contact with anybody at the school. I didn't want them taking notes on what we were doing wrong, or whatever. I don't know. I mean, that's what I know they have done to other parents. Mm-hmm. I still don't know if they have something on us. I actually tried to get records and they said they don't have anything. They only have academic records. Maybe that's true. I don't know.
Did you ever do more research about the specific company that this therapist was contracted through and their background and their funding? Did you ever get more info?
Well, it's a hospital. She's from one of the local hospitals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? A hospital that has pediatric gender clinics. Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, that's just the almost obvious pipeline. I mean,
yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So she is desisted. I don't know if I've already said that. She is desisted now because, I'm pretty sure because we took her out of school. She's not friends with the kids that she was friends with before. She was actually having a lot of social problems in that group. Mm-hmm. Girls can be really tough. It was a group of girls. They were kind of, they liked drama. There was definitely they liked drama. She had kind of a frenemy, and one of her friends was having fun, I think, pitting them against each other. There was all this kind of stuff going on. It was not a healthy group. And they were all kind of LGBTQ identified. And
as 10-year-olds, if anyone forgot,
yes!
We're talking about 10-year-olds.
10, 11. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kids are so confused now. They think they have to identify as something. What am I? Which thing am I? Because it's what we're all hearing all the time. We're saturated with this stuff. And the kids are, and they're being taught about it in school. I know people say that it's not in the curriculum or whatever, but I don't believe the schools are transparent at all about what's being taught to our kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember in middle school, teachers revealing their political beliefs and like going off the rails and like, saying all sorts of crazy stuff that was totally not in the textbook or not in the, set curriculum. So like that, of course, that's bound to happen in some ways, but it wasn't as,
Yeah.
the repercussions weren't as strong. We weren't being indoctrinated into some kind of like religion or philosophy. It was more just like, oh, wow, okay, I see where you stand. I mean, yeah, for the most part, I could find an example where that wasn't true, but how was it at home with your daughter at that point when you took her out, like in the midst of this? Was there a lot of tension between you and your husband and with your daughter? Like, what
Yeah,
was that like?
there was at
Okay.
first, and not for taking her out, because she didn't see that as, we were doing that because we were trying to get her out of the whole trans identified situation.
Yeah.
However, she was upset that we canceled the meeting where she was
Mm.
supposed to come out to us. She was upset about that. I tried to talk to her about, why did she feel like she was a boy? Well, she's just always felt this way. And then one of the interesting things she said to me was, well, there's other kids. I'm not the only one who feels this way. There are other kids at the school
Mm-hmm.
who are too.
Yeah, we know that. We know that much.
Yeah. But of course, that's all part of normalizing it, right?
Right.
It's like, well, I'm not the only one. We slowly had conversations about all of it. And at first I kind of was hitting it head on and saying, like, why do you feel like this? That there's no way you can ever be a boy, no matter how you feel, nobody can make you a boy. You can't be a boy. You are a girl and nothing will ever change that. I said, but no matter how you feel, we will always love you. There's nothing that will ever change that. Mm-hmm. And because you are our child who we love more than anything. And that was one of the conversations I had with her too. At some point I said, we talked about some of the things that she talked about with a therapist who said that she told my daughter that she would keep secrets with her from us, which, by the way, is illegal since our daughter was under 13. At 13, it's not illegal in our state. In fact, it's illegal for them to even tell us after 13. Yeah. But I said, that's what groomers do. That's what people who groom children do. That's dangerous to keep secrets from parents because we're the ones who, typically, there are rare occasions that parents are not good parents. That does happen. But for the most part, parents care the most about their children and are going to do everything to make sure that their children grow up healthy and happy, mm-hmm. more than anybody else.
Yeah.
We're the ones that are going to be there for them when, bad things happen and they need help. Anyway, I said to her, that we love you more than anything in the world. And that I just want you to know that anybody who ever tells you different, that's a person you should not trust. And when I said that to her, she knows that's true. She knows that I love her more than anything. She knew that. She was quite clear on that. And it's true. Anybody who tells her otherwise, that's a person she should not trust. Mm-hmm. So, we had lots of these kinds of conversations. We watched a documentary on Scientology. Mm-hmm. I started we watched a movie about Nazi Germany. And I started just talking about all these historical things and watching things with her and not hitting the trans identification head on, but talking about things with her that I felt were related to what was happening with this whole mass psychosis that we're in the middle of. Mm-hmm. And at some point she started, she started taking that stuff in, I think. I think at one point I started talking about detransitioners, and I said, what happens what's happened. So there's these people who they thought they were the opposite sex. They were so certain that they were. And they went through with all these medical things that they did. And then years later, kind of in their mid-20s, which is what incidentally, not incidentally, actually, when our brains finished developing, they realized that they were actually their sex, and that this was all a mistake. And but now what happened when they decided that they were the opposite sex, when they decided that to be trans identified, they were told how amazing they were. They had all these new friends, they had these new groups. And then when they decided that it was a mistake, all those people dropped them like a hot potato. Not just that, but they like were nasty to them, very nasty. And she said, well, that's like a cult. And I was like, yes.
She got it.
She got it. So, yeah, I mean, I think there were other instances like that. There was a moment when I had a breakdown with her because she had some friends that were still using male pronouns for her. And I was like, because she had said she was desisted. Like she said she didn't think that anymore, right? She knows she's a girl and she doesn't think she's a boy. And but then I heard one of her friends use male pronouns. And I was like, so what's up with that? And are you just telling me this because you think I want to hear that? And I'm like, oh no, I'm kind of freaking out, and she's like, I don't want to talk about it. And at that point, I just lost it. I was like, that's just, I can't actually remember. I think I swore and I left the room. I was just mad. But then I was just so upset. I was bawling. I could not, I was like, I went downstairs. I wasn't around her. I was sitting there like, just bawling. I couldn't stop bawling. And she walks in, she comes downstairs, she walks in and she says, I'm sorry, Mama. And I was like, I'm sorry that I lost my temper with you. I'm just so worried about you. And I was like, I don't understand. And all this like tears coming down my face. Like I'm like blubbering. I can't stop crying. Mm-hmm. I was like, I am just so worried about you. I don't understand why all these girls don't want to be girls. There are people out there who want to take advantage of you. And I want to protect you from that, and then I started getting into, there are people who seem to be turning children against their parents. I was like, that's what they did in Nazi Germany. I said, that there's people that don't want us to use words like mother, father, daughter, son, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, all those words. They don't want us to use those words. And these words, they are important. They're about family. They're about important connections. And the fact that they don't want us to use those words, that's very scary to me. It makes me feel like they're trying to break up families. And that words just are important. And in North Korea, like, again, I'm saying all this stuff, tears coming down. I'm like blubbering. And I was like, in North Korea, they don't have certain words, like the word for friend. When you don't have that word, that affects the way you think. I think I talked about other historical things. I can't actually, China, like I was talking about China, mm-hmm. All these things. Anyway, I went through all of it. I'm sitting there blubbering. She, she was hugging me. She was crying with me. She's like, Mama, it's okay. I'm going to be okay. And I'm like, I'm worried about you. Again, there are people who want to take advantage of you. She's like, nobody's going to do anything to me. Anyway, eventually I calmed down, and so did she. And I think that was a turning point for her and for us, because she saw how genuinely concerned I was, how genuinely scared I was. I think she started taking it a bit more seriously at that point. And the other thing that I will say, as far as kids desisting, what I've observed with a lot of my friends whose kids have desisted is that it takes a while, because they were getting something out of it. They were getting validation, attention, an answer to their problems, whatever. There's so many things that these kids are getting out of this, and they have to figure out how to move on and either replace that or, figure out how to deal with those things. So that's not easy. I mean, for a kid. So we are really, really far from that now. Like, she's pretty much like, I can talk to her about all this stuff. She is okay with me talking to people about what happened. She's quite clear that therapist was not helping her. She said that, actually, she didn't really help me very much. And I was like, yeah, no, she didn't. She didn't actually help her with the real issues that I thought she was going to help her with, that were happening kind of in her friend group. Mm-hmm. She really just functioned to create a wedge between us and our daughter, which we had to work really hard to fix. And we did. I mean, that is the silver lining that I would say came out of all of this, is that our family is now stronger and, more functional. Here's the other thing. Like, I think about the term dysfunctional families, and that I remember hearing when I was growing up. And I've come to the realization that there's no such thing as a functional family. Every family has their stuff. Everybody has their stuff. We are not perfect. We are not perfect parents. And the problem is that this ideology is like the ice in the cracks. It finds vulnerabilities and takes advantage of them. And so it's really anybody who has any vulnerability, and of course most of us do, can be vulnerable to this. So yeah, I feel like we as a family were very lucky. I'm going to say, I think that it takes extreme measures to get your child out of this. That's what I've observed with any of my friends whose kids have desisted.
Yeah.
I think what is it worth to you to make sure that there's a couple of things, because I have friends whose kids have already medicalized. And I don't even know what to say about how heartbroken I am for them and their children. This is such a widespread, massively harming thing that is happening to children and families. I wish people understood.
Yeah.
But for those who, I guess for the parents whose children have already medicalized or are separated from them, and that's mostly the older kids, and it's super hard to.
Yeah. Once they're 18.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's really hard to and a lot of these parents were completely taken by surprise at 18 because their kids went off to college and did this stuff. They had no idea. And people didn't know this was happening at that point. At least at this point, there's been enough people, unfortunately, that it has happened to, that there are parents out there that are warning other parents that this is happening. Mm-hmm. I'm warning other parents. Everybody I know who has kids, I'm like, you need to know this stuff. This is happening. I've warned some of my friends and family, actually, that now see it coming to their small town. It's coming to a town near you. The policies that allow kids to to identify as the opposite sex without their parents knowing, or, to be in opposite sex spaces without their parents knowing. That's happening all over the country.
I like what you said about it really is the ice, between the cracks. It takes, it really preys on any vulnerability, and we are all vulnerable. Like, we are all dealing with at all times, especially young girls, internalized misogyny, perhaps internalized homophobia, the lack of education around our bodies and our cycles, and the wisdom in our bodies and our cycles, right? We're told to get on the pill really early and suppress the thing that makes us uniquely female, so there's so many cracks, like you said, that can be preyed upon. And what I really appreciate about your story, so many things, but the hard approach that you and your husband took. And I think that's worth noting too, that it sounds like you had success in that case because partially you and your husband were totally on the same page. Like, you were a united force. It wasn't, because I've spoken to a lot of women who are, divorced or separated, where either, one partner just doesn't think it's that big of a deal, or in the worst case are, wanting to medicalize the kid, wanting to affirm the kid, and so on. And it becomes a custody battle, and it's just total nightmare. So I really appreciate that you're speaking to like the hard approach, because it's, especially if it requires, especially if we're talking about a single mom having to reorient her whole life to get her kid out of school. I mean, any woman would say, well, is it that bad? Like, is it worth the risk? Like, what am I even dealing with here? So that I'm not criticizing or judging the resistance to that, but I really want women to hear, who are dealing with this right now, that you do have to take extreme measures to get your kid out of this cult.
It's the only thing I've seen work. I can say I have two friends who were able to get their child to desist while they were still in the school. Mm-hmm. But one of them has now taken her child out because it's hard to be in that atmosphere anymore then. I mean, and I also have friends who moved their kids to another school because it's hard for that child, once they have identified as the opposite sex, to get out of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and the kid is like, let's go to another school,
right? Because embarrassing, right? To be like, I'm proclaiming that I'm this is my new identity, I'm getting all these rewards, and then I'm like, whoops, actually I'm not.
So it's a hard thing for a child to get out of once they've socially transitioned,
Yeah.
And the schools are doing this without a parent's consent or knowledge, or oftentimes the parents will have found out and they'll say, stop doing that. And the school's like, I'm sorry, like, this is our policy. This is what we're doing. It doesn't matter what you think. This is the law, is what they'll say, actually.
Wow. Because in your case where you are, in Washington, it is. Wow.
Yeah, it's coming from the state.
Right. Just as this, and this just echoes the loss of, just the decline of parental rights, and I hear someone who's like maybe new to this conversation might hear that and say, well, what about on the other end? Like, shouldn't parents be able to decide to put their kids on puberty blockers? If you're advocating for parental rights, how can you say that? But like, the distinction here obviously is that one is an orientation towards reality and wholeness and like an intact body. Right? That it's not a 1-to-1. And the other is, mutilation, sterilization, irreversible things. Just like, it's illegal to like tattoo. I'm pretty sure it's illegal to tattoo your kid. You can't take your kid to a tattoo parlor and say, but my mommy's here. Like, the tattoo parlor will not tattoo your kid, just like they're not supposed to, pierce. I mean, I guess with ears, there's some wiggle room there because people do take their kids, get their ears pierced. But again, it's not a 1-to-1. Like even equating the two, like body piercings and tattoos are entirely distinct from what we are talking about with the medicalization. But still, even on that level, there is gatekeeping, and there are kind of regulatory systems in place, and it's also just like socially taboo. Like it would be insane to just take your like 11-year-olds to get like tattoos. It would just be weird. Like it would definitely bring up some concerns.
Yeah. And I think I believe that 12-year-olds have had their breasts removed. I know that there's a 15-year-old in my neighborhood that had hers removed. I don't know if she goes to school with my children. I don't know if, there was permission from the parents or not. I know that there's a kid in our neighborhood who got an Uber ride from somebody online who helped her get to Children's Hospital and got hormones in one visit without her parents' consent or knowledge.
And she just had to be 15. So in Washington.
She was actually 13 at that time. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I know in Oregon, you have to be 15 to go to a Planned Parenthood and get testosterone. You don't need, if you're older than 15, you don't need a legal guardian with you to get a prescription for, testosterone injections. But 13 going to a children's, it's all insane. It's all just totally. And I'm so glad you brought up that example, because I really don't think people understand how logistically easy it is to do these things. Like it doesn't have to be a long process. It doesn't have to be complicated, especially in the West Coast, like states that you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. All you have to do is listen to the detransitioners talk. They will tell you the same thing, how easy they got the drugs and surgeries with like literally like little to no therapy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As if any degree of therapy would be sufficient
to have your healthy breast removed. I know.
Yeah. None of it makes it like, and also we're in agreement about that. There's no amount of like, this isn't a case of like, they need to ask more questions or they need at least 6 months of therapy before making this decision. Like we are of the volition that like, this is across the board insane. And at no point would it be acceptable for a child to be recommended to cut off parts of their body.
No, it's absolutely
an emotional conflict. Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. Why would anybody think that was healthy or good?
Wow.
To cut off body parts. Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely insane, really, for anybody to do it.
Yeah. No, we're not just talking about children. Totally. Yeah. We're not just talking about, and that veers into like so many other conversations around like how quick, the medical paradigm, the industrial medical complex is to, remove women like women's uteruses for the purpose of hysterectomy. It's across the board. So we're already desensitized in so many ways around that. Then it is kind of an easier thing to digest in some respect.
How easy is it to get a hysterectomy? Because I was under the impression actually that before all of this transgender mania happened, that it was not easy to get a hysterectomy, that doctors knew that especially younger people couldn't make that decision because they might change their minds later and decide they want to have a child.
Yes, you're right. You're right in the sense for younger women. I hear what you're saying, like in terms of the gatekeeping around reproductive autonomy. In that sense, I was more speaking to like the rate of hysterectomy for women. It's like 1 in 3 women by age 60 will have had their uterus removed, which is like, it's why, I guess my point in sharing that is that we are in a culture when it comes to women's health versus men's health. The protocol, like the MO for women in crisis, whether that's cancer, tumor, cyst, whatever, is to pluck out, to take out, right? More so than when you're dealing with a man with any kind of reproductive cancer. Just because there's also so much less research behind women's health and women's reproductive cancers compared to men's health and men's reproductive cancers.
Right.
So I guess, and Genevieve Gluck, who's, the feminist like archivist and researcher, said a similar thing to me she said, isn't it interesting how when it comes to the women, to be the men, we are having things cut off and taken away. But in the case of the men, in most cases, there's adding on to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Except for, I guess, when they make the hole in men, which I can't.
Yeah. Except for when they make cavities and chop off the penises. Yeah. I mean, it's all brutal. It's all totally brutal and vile.
It's gruesome.
It's totally gruesome. And so maybe now would be a good time to shift into, like what came after. Like, how did you become an activist? Tell us about Partners for Ethical Care. Like, yeah, if you wouldn't mind just getting into that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was like, to borrow a phrase, it was like the curtain had been pulled back, right? And I met through this, like becoming part of support groups, all these other parents that were going through this with their children. And I realized all the horrifying things that were happening, and that all these people were functionally having their children turned against them, so that their children can then go off and harm themselves without their parents being able to do anything to protect them. And not only that, but that all these, oh my gosh, when I realized how big it was, I actually went off in my car and cried and called my mother and said, I don't know what we're going to do. Like, first of all, I was like, I can't send her to the school. I can't send her back to the school. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and I don't know, like, I remember feeling like I wanted to escape to another planet with her. I couldn't figure out where we could go to get away from this, So in getting involved in these support groups, then I made connections with other parents, and actually, really, I think the person who was the catalyst for starting Partners for Ethical Care was Alex Aaron. I remember, it was funny. She was like, yeah, that in the UK, there's all these moms that are like, they're fighting this stuff. And that's how it started. And they're turning things around. And I was like, I remember thinking, well, maybe you should do that, at first. But I think she talked to many of the others of us that were in Partners for Ethical Care. And she, I think, behind the scenes kind of got us all together. And then I was like, okay, this group of women, we all talked to each other, and they're like, do you want to do this thing? And I was like, yes, I want to do whatever I can to stop this horrible thing that is being done to children and families. I want to do whatever I can. And so, yeah, the Partners for Ethical Care was founded, and our mission was to end medicalization of children. And it still is. We are really looking now towards legislation and doing whatever we can to help that along. I hear a lot of people out there talking about, the industry needs to control itself, the professionals. And I think that's great too. I want them to do that as well. But let's just get real here. Where did this all start? It started with the professionals. And we have laws to make sure that professionals or industries don't get out of control. What else do we have these laws for? We have government for a reason. So I think right now, especially because we are in crisis, people are continuing to be harmed by this. Children daily being harmed by this. We need these laws. I really actually don't see most of the parents who are medicalizing their children as the main problem. I see the professionals. And I think most of the laws are being put in place to stop professionals from doing these things.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a whole other thing with just the culture of deferring to authority, which is so normal in our culture to do. Like, what does the doctor say? What did the therapist say? What does the teacher say? Like, always outsourcing our maternal instinct
Yes, I've talked. So I've talked to this about this with a known heretic, which Amy Sousa. I've talked about this a lot with her because it's like all of our instincts as parents, like we outsource all of that. We've been taught that we need to look to the experts for things. Well, the experts in the past have told us to do some pretty messed up things. Like, how about you're not supposed to breastfeed your baby? Well, they had all mothers stop breastfeeding their babies, but we know how important that is now. Your breast milk is perfectly designed for your baby, for your child that you birth. It's like everything you're giving them in that breast milk is perfectly designed for them. And they lose that. They don't get that then when they're bottle fed. Here's another thing that professionals, I do this a lot now, professionals told us to do was to put autistic children into mental institutions. So to take them away from their families. And we know now that was wrong, but that was commonplace, right? I mean, there's other things like lobotomies and all the thalidomide babies and all this kind of, there are many times when these kinds of things were prescribed to us by professionals and they were wrong. And at the time, it must have felt really uncomfortable for these parents of autistic children to put them in a mental health institution. So they overrode their natural feeling of this is wrong because the professionals were telling them to do it. But they knew it was, they felt inside that it was wrong. Right?
Of course.
Of course they did. And so I think that we've gotten in this age where we do outsource all of those things to the professionals, and we override our natural instincts. As parents, we actually do know what to do. If we listen to ourselves. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have survived millennia if parents didn't actually know instinctually how to raise their children. That doesn't mean we're perfect. That doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. But generally speaking, we do know. And that's one of the things that I've tried to say to a lot of parents. Like, if it feels wrong to you, listen to that. Listen to those feelings. Those gut instincts have gotten us here over millennia, So Partners for Ethical Care is one of the ways that I am doing activism. Also, we've been to some protests like we talked about. Gosh, whatever I can do, talking to people like you to educate people about what's happening. I produce a podcast for Partners for Ethical Care called The Witness, and that's actually just a year old, and it is stories from parents mostly about the things that have been happening to their families, the injustices mostly that have been happening to their families. There's some heavy stuff in there. I have tried to include some stories of desistance and some like lighter stories, because it's hard to just listen to negative stuff all the time. Yeah, that also makes me think of like the whole thing with sports and how that seems to speak to people more than anything else, which is for a lot of people in my position or our position who are fighting this kind of astonishing. I mean, because we can go on and on about little girls cutting off their breasts, their healthy breasts, or boys having a hole put in them for God knows what, because it's not for pleasure, all the irreversible harms caused by wrong sex hormones and puberty blockers, sterilization, not being able to have sexual pleasure. That's because that's the result of having puberty blockers, which then 99% of those kids go on to the wrong sex hormones, is sterilization and not being able to then experience sexual pleasure. I can't imagine. I can't imagine doing that to a child.
and I hear your frustration. It is frustrating. I mean, I can imagine more so as a mother of a desisted daughter, like that the sports are the ones that, that issue is what piques people's interest,
I mean, I'm glad it does. I'm glad something does.
Yeah. But
it
is revealing.
Yes. And I'm glad people are speaking up about the sports. And I am, I'm speaking up about it too. It is wrong. It is unfair. We know men's bodies are different than women's. And that's why we have sex segregated sports. It's why women have fought for them. It's why women have fought for sex segregated spaces. I mean, all this stuff, it's all connected. None of it is good. None of what is happening with this ideology in our culture is good.
No, nothing.
It's so weird to be a person who sees that it's wrong. It's like we're in this nightmare where there's the monster is right there in front of us, right? But only like a handful of us can see the monster. Why can't anybody else see the monster? I don't get it.
I mean, I get it because I was someone who couldn't see the monster until I was.
Okay, that's true. Yes. To be fair, that's true.
I mean, it's totally infuriating. I feel the way what you just said. I feel that way now, and I have to totally just like come back to like, well, what were my intentions? How have my values changed? Like, what was important to me then? Who was like the company that I was keeping, And so I certainly have the belief that there are people who are trying to cause intentional harm. Yes. And like the foot soldiers, most of the foot soldiers are maybe have an inkling of like being a narcissistic bully or have like learned that behavior from what's been modeled to them in their community. But mostly, I just thought I was just I really thought I was doing the right thing by going along with all of it.
Yeah.
I really thought that. And that is a result of elaborate and quite, elaborate propaganda.
Yes. Propaganda. We are saturated with it. Absolutely saturated with it, to the point that that people think that it's just a kindness to talk about somebody with the wrong sex pronouns, for instance. They think that's just a kindness.
Yeah.
And I think there's a point in time when I might have agreed with them. I might have gone along with it. Mm-hmm. The problem is that it's now functioning to confuse everyone and to lower our inhibitions and our instincts, because we are confused about what a man and a woman is. And we need to know that. We need to, like, for children, they need to not be confused about that. We know that men historically are the ones who commit, assault or, rape, or, children need to know what the difference is between a man and woman is. Everybody needs to be aware of that. We know as women that we need to be careful when we're out in the world, that we need to be aware that somebody of the opposite sex could be a danger to us.
Totally. Of course. Yeah.
And when we can't tell the difference anymore, and we're teaching children not to be able to override those natural instincts, then we're putting them in danger. And so I'm sorry, but the whole pronoun game, which, I mean, there's so many issues with that, but that is functioning to me to be harmful.
Yeah. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not just the pronoun, right? No. It's a gateway. It's the beginning, or maybe not even the beginning. It's a part of the path to medicalization. It's a very important key part to the disturbance of, this is a chair versus this is a table. This is a man. This is a woman. This is good. This is light. This is dark, right? Like, it's part of that massive, massive disturbance. So So yeah, but on the surface, yeah, someone might say, well, what's it to you? What does it harm? Just change what you're saying. You'll learn. It'll get easier as you go along. And we're
Yeah.
here to say, that no, that is a violation of my dignity. That is a violation of what I know to be true about the world. That is a violation of reality. And how dare you ask me to ignore everything that I know to be true, everything that you know to be true. Like, how dare you try to like bring me along for this like lying mission?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Any last kind of, words of advice, words of wisdom? I mean, you've shared so much. There's so much here for parents who are going through, any inkling of this, and even parents who are not going through, just to have this on their radar. Like, let's talk about, like, we need preventative shit. Like, every parent needs to know what's going on, because as you mentioned, I mean, it comes out of no people. Parents are totally,
they're taken unaware, because the part of the strategy with all of this is to do it under the radar of parents.
Yeah.
That's a deliberate strategy. I mean, I have a cousin in Oklahoma who says that they just passed a policy quietly in November, allowing children to go into the opposite sex intimate spaces in the school. Parents didn't know about it. He just looked it up and found out.
It's right there. Yeah.
No, they're not like letting people know that they're passing these policies.
Right.
They're not open about it. Why are they not open about it? Why do you think? They don't want us to know. So we can't protect our children. What would be my last bit of advice? I think, again, I just want to go back to, as a parent, trust yourself. And really, really trust yourself, and be careful. I hate to say this, but I have such a hard time trusting the professionals. There are some good ones out there that are in this fight with us, but because they realize it's wrong. And there's actually, I think, a lot of teachers even who are seriously uncomfortable with what is happening in the schools, and they're seriously uncomfortable with keeping secrets from parents. They know that's wrong, and they are under threat of losing their jobs. I still wish they would speak up. I mean, I guess I hate to be judgmental. I'm not in that position. However, I would hate to have it on my head that because I socially transitioned a child at school, that I was part of that then led to them medicalizing themselves. I would hate to have been part of that. I don't think I could do it. I mean, now I know what's happening. Some of them might not understand, but if they do, I don't know how they can keep doing it. I don't know. Again, I don't want to judge. But maybe I do. I don't know. I think some people need to speak up.
Well, yeah. I mean, part of, this conversation is, challenging people to see where their, who their allegiance is to, where their loyalty lies, like, and to really sit with what would that feel like 5 years from now, getting a letter from that child saying, hey, this is how my life turned out. And like, I want you to know that like, this wasn't the right thing for me. And like, here's holding you accountable, like in the way that I can, any way that I know how, because that's all we can do, going back down the line, thinking of, and of course there's each child's, a person's degree of like forgiveness and how they move forward with what's been done to them is different, but there has to be accountability.
Yeah. And not just the teachers, the administration, like, they're the ones who are passing the policies, the states. I mean, really, gosh, there's so many people responsible.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, if you're a person who understands, because I know there are many people out there who don't understand the harm that's being done. But once you see it, stand up, please, because children are being irreversibly harmed, and so are families. Parents are losing years of their children's lives losing contact with them when they could have been helping them. This is like the most massive, I think, medical scandal, but it's more than just medical.
Yeah.
I mean, psychological too. For parents, just realize you're the savior of your children. Like right now, you have to do what you can to save them. You have to do what you can to protect them. You cannot trust the professionals. There are some, but you better check them out really well before you trust anybody.
Yeah.
And because some people will say, oh, they won't affirm a child, right? Some therapist or whatever, and then they will go ahead and do it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I'm of the belief that if you aren't working with someone who isn't outwardly, publicly against this, whether they're a therapist, whether they're a coach like I am, whether they are promoting this as some kind of healer, like whatever it is, if they are not outwardly taking a stance against this, how can you actually know, right? You have to use that as evidence to be sure. Like I am of the belief, like I don't know, like Sasha Ayad or, like anyone else that you resource.
So we have on Partners for Ethical Care, we have a resource page, which has all those other resources that are out there. And also people can email us at support@partnersforethicalcare.com if they have questions, and we will do our best to connect them with somebody who can help them.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being, really on the front lines as a mother in this. Yeah, you're the information that you have, what you've been through, the wisdom that you share, and the conviction that you have to spread awareness, I hope, really resonates. I know is going to resonate with the women listening. So thank you again for all that you're doing.
Thank you for talking to me. Yeah, it's been great.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support my work, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To stay in the loop for my latest coaching programs, hypnosis sessions, free resource guides, and more, follow me on Instagram at whosebodyisit and visit my website, whosebodyisit.com.